Pakistan at the time and working with teachers there. And I was flipping through the English newspaper, and they had this great article on him. And this was one of the things that he said, one of his quotations that really resonated with me. And so I thought, that's perfect. So I wrote it down because I knew someday, somewhere, I would use it. And so here it is. And I just really agree that you're always learning, even if you're not even aware that you're learning, even if you're not like opening a textbook and saying, okay, I'm going to study algebra now. Still, in life, and whenever circumstances happen to us and in life environments, we learn something from those circumstances. So that's learning, that's growth. So that's why I like this professor, Bashir was his name. And I'm really sorry, but I forgot what NCA stands for. I believe it was like, anyway, it was a group that he was a part of, but he is a professor in Pakistan. Okay, so who will we have to be in the 21st century? So we have actually heard, or I have presented several times on autonomous learning, independent thinking, some of these ideas, and you may also have seen a lot of articles in our field of research, in TESOL or TOEFL, talking about who we are becoming as teachers and as learners, and how we are progressing in our learning environments. So I would just like to ask your opinion based on that research. Who will we have to be in the 21st century? Who do you think we will have to be as both learners and teachers in the 21st century? The reason that I'm asking you this is because right afterwards I will show you what the Department of Education in the U.S. says that we should be. So I'm trying to see if you are aligned with what they say as well. So who do you think we shall have to be?
You should have to be some kind of Krishna with so many arms and so many tasks to do. So a multitaskers, I think.
Okay, sure. I do like the imagery that you have of like having so many hands, because we will have to be very flexible and adaptable and be able to manage many tasks, as you said. All right, what else? What do you see happening in students now? They're not the same as they were 10 years ago. What has changed? What do you see?
First of all, they are more interested in foreign languages, and I believe we must be instructors in the future and creators of computer programs, use everything possible to improve their knowledge. We should be very creative, and we should just give attention to any student, because we are afraid all the time that some students are not learning, they are just sleeping or just enjoy themselves at the lessons. And to make everybody learn is our task.
That's really interesting that you would bring up the perception that we have sometimes as teachers that students aren't learning. Because oftentimes it is a perception because they learn in different ways. And it reminds me of a TED Talk I was listening to this weekend. Is everyone familiar with TED? Yes? Do you know TED? Yes? You know TED? I've mentioned it before. Do you know TED? No? So I'm just going to write it really quickly on the board. TED is a collection of, they call it ideas worth spreading. So it's a collection of ideas worth spreading. But basically what TED does is it's a group that organizes workshops, conferences, etc., and they get the experts in their field to give either between a 5 and 20-minute presentation on what they're studying. And the presentations are amazing. So it's TED, and you can Google it if you put it like that, and you could also find it by saying maybe ideas worth spreading. And the one that I want you to think about that we're actually going to have a discussion group later this month is, I believe this is this man's name. Salman Khan. It could be, this could be an O. The spelling may be off, but I believe his name is Salman Khan. And he was actually talking about what you just mentioned. And why I find it really interesting is because one of the things that he was saying was that learning has changed so much that he put together a bunch of YouTube videos for his cousins. He was teaching them something like geometry or something that had to do with math. And his cousins loved the YouTube videos, and they told him they loved the YouTube videos more than they loved actually being with him and being tutored by him. And first he was like, what do you mean? I mean, it's face to face. Why would you like, something on the internet more? And then he realized it was because they could stop, fast forward, go back, repeat. They could interact in it with the videos in a way that they needed to get the information. And so I found that really interesting because that's what I see happening with my students as well. I think that in the future, a lot of English language learning can be online. A lot of the grammar-based teaching can be online. The students can study it at home, come to class, and then we, as the experts, that would be the opportunity for them to practice and us to guide them in the practice. And that is like really exciting for me because imagine how much more interesting English classes would be if they do the majority of the grammar focus and study and then you're just practicing with them and you're guiding them through their mistakes. Because there's still a role for us, but I loved that idea. So what you were saying just reminded me of what he had mentioned on TED. And so I do, if you're at all interested in, it's a 20-minute presentation. He has his own university now too. I think it's called, I can't remember. I want to say it's like Khan University or something like that, but it's all online and it's 3 classes. So in maths and sciences and everything like that, it's fantastic. So that kind of helped us transition to the academic side and looking at school-focused skills. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what the U.S. Department of Education put aside as the 21st century school skills that students should be focused on. So this one should look really similar to what we already do with students when they're in primary and secondary school, right? So we have English, reading or language arts. You would have some sort of literature classes probably. You may not teach them as the English teacher, but the students are getting them in some form. World languages, for you that would be English. Arts, just so that they can basically recognize something such as Picasso's name and understand that he was an artist, or Van Gogh, or any of the greats. We have mathematics, economics, science, geography, history, government, and civics. What is civics? I don't know what civics is. Can you help me?
Civil law, maybe?
That's a good guess. Think about, okay, when we think about the term civil law, what does civil imply? It's a law for
civil community.
The community, that's right. So this is basically looking at how we socialize and interact within our communities. So civics teaches us to be responsible civilians, right? So that's what civics is. So these are the core subjects that are not going to change because they're still needed. What's interesting though is for both the school and the individual, these are some new skills that are going to be changing. So the other necessary subjects are global awareness. What do you think it means to be globally aware?
To wake up to the fact.
Sure, but tell me more about what the fact is. So yes, to wake up to the fact, absolutely, but the fact of what?
Well, we know about pollution of environment, but some people maybe ignore or maybe not active, and we have to wake up to that fact because it's our future.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that we have to be aware that we are all ultimately connected because we're all inhabitants of this planet, right? Okay, great. So that's one perspective of global awareness that I would agree with. What else does the term global awareness imply for us?
Here, for example, students, young people hate reading newspapers. They just don't want to learn about tragedies, about life of other people. They're concentrated on their way of life and their small troubles.
Okay, great. That's a good transition to actually what we were talking about earlier. Before, there were like 5 of us sitting here earlier before the others came in and before we started. And what was your name again? Natalia was asking me about what's going on with the weather in the U.S. You know, so we were talking about the storm that was happening. And we need to know about that kind of a storm because you know what? Actually, that storm affected my life here. And I'll tell you how. As you know, I oftentimes have to go to the embassy or I'm somehow connected to the embassy. Because of that storm, the server, the embassy server for email was shut down in Washington, D.C. That meant that all the communication that I needed to get across yesterday didn't happen because it was shut down. And so that impacted me here. And that's an example of, in many ways, how we do have to be aware. I understood once I saw delay, 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 delay after all of the email messages I sent, like, oh right, the storm. But if I hadn't known about the storm, I would have been really confused. So I think that global awareness just basically means that we're aware of how all of our actions or inactions as civilians and as a country impact others. We also see a lot of it with what's going on in the EU right now. You know, with Greece and Italy and Spain and all of the problems that we're having with the euro and what the outcome, the potential outcome might be. So these are things that are going to impact all of us eventually. So students need to be aware of that. Also, financial, economic, business, and entrepreneurial literacy. Why do you think that would be important for students?
In this case, they're going to be extremely intelligent students, I should say.
I hope so.
So what, each time when you work for yourself, you work for another guy who is your accountant or lawyer, something like that. Mm-hmm. Why not to work for yourself, be a lawyer, entrepreneur, and so on and so on?
Absolutely. So this, for entrepreneurial, it's just the basic, I mean, it's the basic business, it's the fundamentals of business. And one of the things I think that is a common idea, I know in the U.S., is that they always want to encourage entrepreneurship because it's also associated with a fairly strong middle class. And when people feel like there's a fairly strong middle class, they feel like society is a little more stable, there's more balance. And so by teaching students these skills, and this could be something simple, I gave this example yesterday. Something we do in the U.S. when we're really young is oftentimes we want to make money to buy something, right? Maybe it's to go to the movie, maybe it's to buy a new dress, whatever it is. So when we're little, we'll have a lemonade stand, or we'll sell brownies or cookies or something like that. Exactly. So what we actually have to learn, though, are the basic financial things Like, if I buy a bunch of lemons, and I buy sugar, and I buy ice, and I have water, how much money do I have to sell each cup of lemonade for so that I can make a profit? You know, because I want to buy the dress in the end. I don't want to spend all my money just to give away lemonade for free. So that's something that could be done on a small scale with kids in class to teach these sorts of skills. And it's fun. They don't even know that they're learning. They have no idea they're learning to do business and math at that time. So I also think that if people had better financial skills in general, we would not have had such an extraordinary crash in the U.S. Because people, I think a lot of people don't understand the fundamentals of economy. And when you have $50,000 in debt, and you have a job that only pays $25,000, it's not going to work. So, I mean, just teaching basics to students. Civic literacy. So previously we defined what civic was. What do you think civic literacy means in this context?
My rights.
They are your rights, and we talked about how it meant, what did we say civic was? I know what it is. Let's see that you learned the vocabulary word.
Closer to civilization.
Yes. Okay. How you're developing society, like your role in society.
Right.
I like to see that people are writing that down so they'll remember the next time I ask what civic is. So, determining your role in society, civic literacy, what would this mean? If civic is to help you study how you fit into society, what would civic literacy mean? Guesses?
Rights and obligations.
Okay, yes, sure, why not? Knowing your basic rights and obligations. Is that what you said? Is that what you meant? I thought you were defining civic, because I'd asked for a definition. I'm sorry. Okay, so you're also right. So, knowing what are the fundamental rights? What are the fundamental rights? Do you guys know the fundamental? Like freedom, what else? Equality. What else? Like think of the UN, right? Don't we all have fundamental rights? What are our fundamental rights? Liberty. Okay, so these are fundamental rights, and that would be one of the things that you would teach in civic literacy, just so that, and that would also vary state by state depending on what the legislation is for that particular state in terms of rights. So you would teach universal rights, your right as a human being, and you would teach rights under whatever government it is that you are a part of. Health literacy, what does that mean?
The basics of how to stay healthy.
Okay.
And maybe about nutrition.
Okay.
And some other like private things to do every day. So it's like basics.
Okay, great. And what would be some basic things that would be important to teach them?
Healthy way of life.
What does that mean?
Another thing, we teach our students not to drink, not to smoke, to...
Even obesity.
Yes. Okay. Right? He added, so there's not to drink, not to smoke, but also important obesity.
When you're overweight.
So that, as you know, is a big problem in the U.S. right now. There are lots and lots and lots of very large people. And we have to teach how to eat properly and nutrition because it's clear that that message is not being conveyed. You know, parents may not understand it themselves, and so they're not passing on good information to children. So that's another thing. Also think about what's been going on recently. Starting all the way back in SARS, and then we had H1N1, there are a lot of pandemics that we have been threatened with. So just teaching the basics like washing your hands, don't cough on other people, if you're sick, stay home, things like that. That is something that should be universal. Things like STDs, nobody wants to talk about it, but it needs to be talked about, because how do you prevent them if nobody will talk about them? Sexually transmitted diseases. Right? How do you stem the AIDS epidemic if nobody talks about AIDS and nobody tells people how they can get it and how they cannot? So it also talks about, health literacy is intended to also confront prejudices and stereotypes that we have in our communities around certain health issues as well. This would also be mental health, right? Okay,